Firstly, I wish to state that I didn't anticipate being in this situation. I did not expect to be preparing a speech to be read on my behalf. It's Magdalena. I was expecting to be there with you all, immersed in Namibia's arts and culture, hospitality, amongst peers and friends in Africa, focused on the agenda at hand, human creativity, a vital economic, social and cultural resource. Nonetheless, life throws us challenges, so here is one for you. Try to imagine a rather short Latino woman with curly hair who gesticulates, I'm going to add wildly, with not only her hands but also her arms, delivering a presentation to you on the fundamentals for the healthy ecology of creative professionals. A topic she is passionate about, and although no longer a practicing visual artist, knows firsthand what underpins this urgent need for attention on a healthy ecology. The creative, the artist, the maker, the designer, the crafter, the innovator, the provocateur, the expert, the cultural keeper, the leader. Whether individual or collective, without these creative people, not only is there no art, no music, no visual, no imagination, we would lose so much more. My presentation today focuses on the people, the foundation of the sector that we're a part of, that we engage with, represent, study, practice, advocate for, support and champion. By the end, I trust that you will agree that without a holistic approach to ensuring a set of fundamentals, it is impossible for there to be a healthy ecology, let alone truly harness the human creativity that is key to our sustainability. I acknowledge the Government of Namibia and all its representatives, and I highly commend the National Arts Council of Namibia, and in particular Patrick Sam for his vision in developing this programme. As well as his great team, of course, they've worked so hard, and I suspect you have no idea how hard they have worked. I acknowledge the powerhouse that is Rosemary Mangope, who you've just heard from, as well as her day job as CEO of the National Arts Council of South Africa. She plays a key role on the IFACCA board in voicing issues relevant to Africa. I should add that these resonate very strongly in other regions. I also wish to acknowledge the IFACCA team, and this is where the pronouns get weird, who have worked so hard and closely with our colleagues in Namibia and in the region, Meredith and Diane, who is present here today also, Kylie, who's our Head of Strategic Data and Knowledge, who was instrumental in developing this presentation, as well as Jess and Bridget. And finally, I thank all of the IFACCA members and delegates present. Thank you. So, firstly, a little bit about who we are. The International Federation of Arts Councils and Culture Agencies is a network of arts and culture government agencies and ministries. Our vision is a world in which arts and culture thrive and are recognised by governments and peoples for their contribution to society. Our federation leads global thought and action for arts and culture in public life and forges collaboration and exchange between members in over 70 countries. Our agenda is to connect our member institution with their peers around the world and help them deliver on their charters and be a source of knowledge and data when tackling issues in their jurisdictions. Instances such as the Arts Summit of Southern Africa provide a cross-section of experience, actors, views and examples. This rich tapestry is how we build capacity and knowledge, and by exchanging new ideas, new collaborations emerge. Our World Summit on Arts and Culture, with its 8th edition coming up next year, amplifies this at a global scale. I mention this because it is through the understanding of all actors and contributors in the field of arts, culture and creative industries that we are best positioned to ensure a healthy ecology for those to thrive. So, to the key resource of the sector, the creatives. In 2007, a group of artists, authors and intellectuals gathered at the Gori Institute in Dakar, Senegal, to explore how democracy, equitable development and culture overlap and profoundly influence each other. Led by South African artist and anti-apartheid movement leader Breitenbach, the group established the Imagine Africa initiative, grounded in the belief that, and I quote, "The aesthetics of interaction with the environment, immortalised experiences through art and objects of beauty, form the foundation of ethical consciousness." That same year, Breitenbach published its manifesto entitled Imagine Africa, which called upon Africans to exercise their critical imagination as a means to reconcile the continent's conflicted past and, I quote again, release our creative and transformative potential. Breitenbach's perspective suggests that a thriving cultural ecology can not only enhance the meta-narratives that shape a continent's development, but that the cultural sector itself benefits from a compelling narrative to galvanise public will and guide its development as well. 11 years later, the internationally renowned architecture, design and arts journal Design made a compelling case for how local forms of storytelling, including Afrofuturism is creating a different narrative for Africa. The Design piece, among others, celebrates Africa's vibrant cultural resources and complements arguments in favour of asset-based development. This asset-based development model encourages communities to become more aware of their existing resources and power, to have confidence in their own capacities to affect change, and to take authorship of local solutions. An asset-based approach also complements Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen and philosopher Martha Nussbaum's capabilities-based approach to just development, which asserts that economic development should not be seen as an end in itself, but as an intermediate goal. Human flourishing should be considered the most meaningful aim when investing in any industry's development. Such flourishing is rooted in human agency, which results from development strategies that aim to build human capital alongside other forms of capital, such as those generated by the cultural sector. Again, the emphasis on human capital. In 2018, World Bank development expert and Ugandan Patrick Kabanda published the book The Creative Wealth of Nations. This book reinforces Sen's perspective, as well as that of multiple economists and cultural policy researchers, which is that while largely invisible, the creative economy is a powerful engine for economic and social development. And I quote, "If nations can fully engage their creative wealth manifested in the arts, they are likely to reap major monetary and non-monetary benefits from the cultural sector." Increasingly, countries around the world understand how culture can drive and enable development. Furthermore, the preamble of the United Nations 2030 Agenda affirms that, quoting again, "We acknowledge the natural and cultural diversity of the world and recognise that all cultures and civilizations can contribute to and are crucial enablers of sustainable development." More specifically, in relation to cultural and creative industries in Africa, 2/3 of African countries have signed the UNESCO 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. This convention calls for greater investment in the creative and cultural industries and for creative products from the Global South to have preferential access to markets in the Global North. As I mentioned in my introductory text, cultural expressions shape our society. The ways in which people interact and reflect upon their perceptions and how they imagine their futures. A common theme I encounter in various discussions and meetings around the world is the urgent need to imagine different futures. This requires a different lens, a creative lens. Creative professionals are pivotal to this process, and a healthy ecology can empower them to contribute to society, culture, and the economy. So, some definitions. There are multiple conceptions of what constitutes a healthy ecology of and for creative professionals. The cultural ecology has been used in the discipline of anthropology since the 1950s. It means the study of human adaptations to social and physical environments. But the use of the word ecology in relation to the cultural sector is a more recent phenomenon. In times of rapid change, our ability to adapt and be resilient is more critical than ever. While many key actors use slightly different terminology in describing the ecology of the sector, most of the underlying principles are shared. For example, UNESCO defines cultural and creative industries as, quote, sectors of organised activity whose principal purpose is the production or reproduction, promotion, distribution and or commercialisation of goods, services and activities as cultural, artistic or heritage-related nature. Arterial Network, the dynamic Pan-African network of cross-sector actors in Africa's creative and cultural sectors, has a vision to ensure a dynamic and prosperous African creative sector, engaged in qualitative creative practices that contribute to positive and lasting changes in governance policies, as well as cultural, economic and social living environments. And the Arts and Humanities Research Council Cultural Value Project in the UK adopts economist Anne Markuson's definition of the cultural ecology as meaning, quoting again, the complex interdependencies that shape the demand for and production of arts and cultural offerings, and argues that examining culture as an ecology rather than an economy offers a better approach because it provides a comprehensible overview that does not privilege one type of value, financial value, over others that attach to culture. What is clear is that our cultural wealth rests in the hands and minds of our creative professionals and cultural keepers. They tap into our imagination and help us adapt to such change. Australian artist and leader Robin Archer stated in a keynote speech in 2014 that, quote, "We can never discount the power of the human spirit in managing disturbance. Sometimes these moments of extreme challenge can result in new forms, new ideas, and radical new propositions for maintaining and building resilience." So to the fundamentals. when I, Magdalena, was approached to present on the fundamentals required for a healthy creative ecology, my starting point was to revisit the value chain of cultural expressions as UNESCO defines it. And this is quoting UNESCO's definition. The culture cycle being creation, production, dissemination, exhibition or reception, transmission and consumption or participation. A vast range of frameworks exist around the world that describe what conditions are required. I will highlight 6 and focus in more detail on the first 3 that relate directly to creative professionals. Fundamental 1, diversity of perspectives and disciplines to ensure vibrancy and well-being. United Nations Special Rapporteur on Cultural Rights, Karima Banu, states that by, quote, engaging people and encouraging their interaction through artistic and cultural expression, actions in the field of culture can open up a space in which individuals and groups can reflect upon their society, confront and modify their perception of one another, express their fears and grievances in a non-violent manner, develop resilience after violent or traumatic experiences, including human rights violations, and imagine the future they want for themselves and how to better realise human rights in the society in which they live. The increased social interactions, mutual understanding and trust that can be built or rebuilt through these initiatives are essential to achieve a range of human rights goals and respect cultural diversity. A healthy ecology assumes the embrace of a multiplicity of artistic, creative and cultural expressions. Not only the acceptance, but rather the appreciation of different aesthetics that create a vibrant environment for the emergence of new ideas. Diversity has many layers and viewpoints: culture, ability, gender, sexual, generations, faith, amongst others. And generally, the most interesting, innovative, creative work is more often than not being created in the fringes. For this diversity to thrive, it expects its creatives to be treated with dignity and respect, that they can sustain their practice and not discriminated against in any way, and if inequities exist, a commitment to levelling the playing field. Their well-being is at the heart of this condition. There are alarming statistics across the world on the living conditions of creatives today. Mental health issues are also at an all-time high due to low income and alienation, especially for senior citizens in the creative sector. In the last 6 months, several policy reports have been published concerning evidence that artists' salaries are decreasing, making it less sustainable to be a full-time practicing artist, with very few exceptions. The Australia Council for the Arts commissioned the latest edition of the David Throsby and Katya Petitskaya report series, Making Art Work, an economic study of professional artists in Australia, which tracks trends in the lives and working conditions of Australian artists over 30 years and identifies challenges and opportunities for artists' careers into the future. The decline in the ability of artists to practice full-time sends alarm bells. We must work together to revert the situation. Examples of actions emerge in Estonia as they are looking to increase minimum wage for cultural workers, and Chile recently passed a bill in Congress to provide minimum wage and appropriate workplace conditions for professionals in the performing arts, co-presented by the Ministry of Labour, Employment and the Ministry of Culture. This requires cross-portfolio engagement as well as solid dialogue between the government and the sector. The OCDE, which is the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, has developed an index that measures well-being. It states that, quote, there is more to life than the cold numbers of GDP and economic statistics. Its Better Life Index allows you to compare well-being across countries based on 11 variables that the OECD has identified as essential in the areas of material living conditions, which includes housing, income and jobs, the quality of life, which includes community, education, environment, governance, health, life satisfaction, safety and work-life balance. This balance is key for a healthy ecology to thrive. Back to the diversity agenda. Arts Council England is leading with its creative case. Its chair, Sir Nicholas Sorotis, stated that the issue of diversity was crucial to the way in which society and the arts connect. In a report Arts Council England released in January 2018, he wrote, arts and culture have a part to play in ensuring that the opportunity does not become confined to an ever smaller and self-selecting demographic. And he added, this is a quote, it is not only a matter of choosing to do the right thing, but of understanding diversity as a source of cultural inspiration. He also called on the arts to do more to help young people and challenge socio-economic barriers, saying, our young, diverse population is a national asset, a multitude of perspectives, ideas, talents and creativity, but we have a problem. We are, as a society, depriving this young population of opportunity. He concludes that the arts have to respond to the demands and opportunities of a new political, social, economic and technological era. In addition to well-being and respect, the creative sector does not exist in isolation. It is essential to be connected, develop strategic relationships, partnerships and cross-sector relationships. Sector-specific convenings, such as the Arterial Network's African Creative Economy Conference and African Creative Cities Programme, offer strong examples of the ways in which intermediaries can foster critical relationships and valuable professional networks. Fundamental too is the financial and professional support frameworks that encourage experimentation, collaboration and creation. Financial capital, including risk capital, is drawn from a range of sources, including earned revenues, public and private investment. Often the focus is on funding mechanisms that have budget constraints, where the offer and demand ratios can seem very demoralising. IFACCA is a champion for public investment in the arts, yet I would like for us to consider a range of ways in which public agencies can invest to support in this healthy ecology that is not limited to historical funding structures. This also expects dialogue with the sector to identify the most relevant and urgent issues. For example, this support can be through professional development and capacity building resources. Like all professionals, artists and creative practitioners benefit from ongoing professional development, particularly in gaining entrepreneurial skills. Specialised training programs can be found around the world, such as leadership programs that generate creative career pathways and support a network of peers. This, in turn, strengthens the sense of community building and supports creatives' well-being. Other approaches that grant or direct public investment include matchmaking, startup grants, and social ventures. In terms of private investment, there is a selection of possible mechanisms and measures. This includes tax reductions on cultural goods, sponsorship, public-private partnerships, percentage legislation, which includes tax incentives and deductions, individual and corporate donations, transfer of ownership in property in lieu of tax payments, matching funds, lottery funds, vouchers, banking schemes, foundations, arts and business partnerships, crowdfunding and online fundraising, and venture philanthropy as long-term engaged philanthropy, just to name a few. In places with less traditional financial resources, including rural contexts, exciting experiments are underway to explore how models such as sector-specific credit unions, cooperative banks, and community development financial institutions can generate greater access to equity for creative professionals. The more diverse the investment and supporting landscape, the better equipped are creative professionals to take advantage of opportunities that are relevant to their practices and different markets. As in all business models, reliance on one source of income creates high risk. Government agencies across portfolios, legislators, policymakers, and the private sector must be engaged in these processes in dialogue with the creative sector. I'm certain Nesta will be able to share many success stories in this area as global innovation foundation that backs new ideas to tackle the big challenges of our time, from the pressures of an ageing population to stretched public services and a fast-changing job market. No pressure. Fundamental three. Cultural infrastructure that provides platforms for creatives to present, provoke, and transmit their work. Here I will focus on two elements. One, space to create, and two, accessible markets and effective distribution channels. Congress in Mexico recently passed its historic culture bill. Mexican cultural policy expert Carlos Villaseñor Anaya, who was instrumental in the drafting of this bill, states that the focus has shifted from built cultural infrastructure, meaning bricks and mortar, to a cultural rights-based approach that focuses on people. It's the people that create the cultural infrastructure rather than just infrastructure. Like many vulnerable groups, artists need access to stable, affordable and convenient spaces in which to live and work. In many parts of the world, there is fear that the presence of artists and creative professionals exacerbates gentrification. Whereas in others, the lack of housing affordability makes it unsustainable to remain. A more nuanced and widespread story needs to be told about the ways in which artists contribute to the positive transformation of place. Recognising that the type of workspace needed by artists working in various disciplines, the London Authority produced a taxonomy of potential investment options so that it could evaluate its existing building stock more effectively. This included studios and live workspaces, affordable housing for artists, artist-run multi-purpose spaces in residential, mixed-use, commercial and industrial areas, passages of ordinance or adjustments in zoning regulations and formal arts districts, repurposing and renovating or converting industrial and manufacturing spaces, establishing formal and informal artist communities and cooperatives, and using affordable housing tax credits, historical preservation funds, and mixed-use development strategies. The City of Melbourne has won the award for most livable city in the world for 7 consecutive years. And I'll just give you some insight. Magdalena was based in Melbourne for a very long time, so they always get props. It may not have the glorious background of the Opera House, or the beaches, or the Sydney Harbour Bridge. Yet it has a thriving creative community where investment from all tiers of government is solid. In 2009, the Melbourne City Council launched Creative Spaces, which encourages artists and creative professionals to work and live in the city by providing affordable accommodation and studio space. The council knew that it could not lose its key asset, its creative asset. This has shaped the city as a cultural hub. Creative Spaces partners with government, philanthropic, private organisations and educational institutions to provide space for arts and cultural production to thrive. Creative cluster models are also promoted to both provide creatives with space as well as access to peers and potential collaborators. In a recent article in the Conversation Journal from May 2018, Professor Richard Haynes, CEO of the South African Cultural Observatory, stated that, quoting, "Clusters represent a promising approach for the growth and sustainability of the creative economy in South Africa, which currently contributes between 2.5 and 3% to national GDP. He indicated that this figure could be doubled with stronger policy and a higher cultural and creative industries profile. In terms of access to markets and effective distribution channels, the range of issues and barriers are plenty and diverse. However, the 2 key factors for accessibility to markets are visibility and readiness. This goes back to the value chain, being respected, supported, having space to create, exhibit and present work. All these are enablers to ensure visibility. The other is readiness, that is having the understanding, skills and capabilities to participate in the market and have an informed consideration of the appropriate channels. It is important that this role is shared across the actors engaged in the sector and not only assumed by public agencies. Often it is the creative professionals themselves that are the best mentors to help build such capacities. Public agencies can support through such initiatives, structured mentoring programs and industry meetings and market platforms. It is also worth noting that access to markets and connections to peers is particularly important in non-urban contexts, where creative practitioners and cultural bearers often work in isolation. Fundamental 4. Purposeful and enabling policies and legislation to safeguard, protect and support the free flow of ideas, people and cultural goods. A healthy ecology requires a solid legislative and enabling policy framework. New Zealand is leading in this area through its whole-of-government approach to citizen wellbeing, underpinned by its cultural policy engagement. There is an increasing need to focus on holistic policy development. Such public policies in arts, culture and the creative industries should also relate to migration, copyright and trade, but also regulations that would more likely fall under social policy. For example, several support programs for artists are tied with their tradition of centralised social services, supporting the basic needs of all citizens. This could be critical for artists and similar types of workers. Slovenia, Finland, Italy and Austria are a few of the many countries that offer pension and retirement programs to deserving artists as defined by those governments. The South Korean Artists Welfare Act extends the country's employment insurance to 180,000 artists and accident insurance to 57,000 artists. In March 2018, the Arts Council of Wales published the results of a mapping exercise capturing more than 200 activities that use the arts to improve people's well-being with the aim of creating a more equal, cultural and sustainable Wales. The document will inform strategic discussions between the Welsh Government, the Arts Council of Wales, and a range of other partners active in arts and health. While in Brazil, British Council Brazil and Brazil's Public Service Agency, supporting small to medium startups, released a report to focus on supporting creative entrepreneurs and developing the mechanisms that encourage a more diverse, inclusive, and confident creative economy in Brazil. In the United Arab Emirates, the Ministry of Culture and Knowledge Development said public places such as hospitals and other health facilities must bear imprints or become platforms of carefully curated visual arts from over 80 art galleries in Dubai to be part of the healing and treatment of patients. Due to wide gaps between cultural industries in the developed and developing countries, the challenge lies in strengthening local capacity, improving access to global markets through new partnerships, obtaining support from experts, and combating piracy and defending intellectual property rights. So 5, research and evaluation. Relevant data on the scope, scale, composition and impact of the sector to support policymaking, investment and advocacy. Armed with relevant data, we can make informed decisions on how best to invest in diverse cultural industries. Research can drive more effective policy, advocacy and investment. UNESCO's Reshaping Cultural Policies report analyses the implementation of the 2005 UNESCO Convention on Protection and Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions and evaluates policies that support creativity around the world. The report highlights the need for robust data on artists working globally. To that end, they launched a global survey on the status of the artist, a global survey on policies and measures taken around the world to support the economic and social rights of artists. It's currently open and closes in November. I will post it to the Art Summit hashtag, and we encourage as many people to participate as possible. It's coming at a critical time when artists and creators around the world have reiterated calls for stronger rights, fairer remuneration, copyright reform, legislation to give creators a fair deal from global companies, especially those providing a platform for user-generated content. The report also states that artists' employment and social status continues to be precarious, with low access to social security, pensions and other welfare provisions. On to 6. Overarching value propositions or sector development narratives. Finally, the ecology should be built on a coherent and compelling narrative about the public value of arts and culture that challenges misperceptions about the importance of such investment. In its 2003 report, Investing in Creativity, the Urban Institute stated that society perceives making art as frivolous or recreational. Many artists report that people have no sense of what artists' time or products are worth, and often expect them to donate both for nothing. Artists' societal contributions are not well understood, documented, or publicised. In contrast, internationally renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma strongly believes in the role of culture in society. In April 2016, scientists, entrepreneurs, artists, policymakers, innovators, educators, students and more came together to discuss citizen artistry at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. The key question was, how can the arts influence positive change in people's lives? These cultural thinkers debated and imagined the role that arts and culture in society through the lens of the ideals of John F. Kennedy set forth in the United States during his presidency. These are courage, service, justice, freedom, gratitude, exploration, and innovation. I've got a link here as well, which I'll also post to the Art Summit site if you wanted to watch the conversations that happened there. In conclusion, I am certain throughout the Assa program that you'll hear from a range of experts that will delve deep into some of the issues that have been touched upon here. However, I trust Magdalena, has made a case for the foundational role that the creative professionals play in the health of this ecology and the fundamental conditions required, which are, as a recap, 1, respect, dignity and well-being. 2, diverse supporting frameworks. 3, accessible cultural infrastructure and platforms. 4, purposeful and enabling policies. 5, investment in research and evaluation. And 6, shared and compelling narratives for all actors involved. Still in Magdalena's voice. I will be following the dialogue from a distance and look forward to seeing you in Kuala Lumpur for the 8th World Summit on Arts and Culture, as the world gathers to explore how arts and culture respond, influence, disrupt, provoke, lead and affect change. Fostering agile and mobile minds, creativity has the ability to challenge ideas and create a rich environment in which to test different ways of thinking and doing, as we imagine inclusive, sustainable and resilient futures for peoples and the planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Meredith. Thank you very much, Meredith. I don't know how, I know that we are all tech savvy and that we'd like to move into the 4th Industrial Revolution, but I don't know how interactive it'll be to have a Q&A like that. However, I recognize, and for my sins, I know that we have a UNESCO expert in the room, and I think I can invoke my privilege of being the chairperson and call upon Avril Joffe, who was part of this UNESCO report, yes, to say a few words following the presentation that we've just had. You were part and parcel of this. In fact, you wrote a whole chapter in that report. And I think we need to leverage on the fact that you are here. And you know, when I said all of us are actually going to be making an input and making a contribution, I will be finding you and then requesting you to actually make an input. And this is what peer learning and leadership is all about. Our next topic is going to be about cultural leadership. And all of us should stand ready and stand in the gap to lead. Thank you, Avril.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm actually not going to speak now. I need to say two things. Number one, I'm not the only UNESCO expert in the room. There are many other UNESCO experts. I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Jenny Mbayi. She's also an expert on the Cultural Policy and Governance Facility of the 2005 Convention. And I am doing a presentation tomorrow, so I don't want to, preempt what I'm going to say. But I want to say just on Magdalena's very, very useful overview of the 6 fundamentals and her way, the way that she brought in evidence from all different countries around each of those 6 fundamentals is exactly the process we went through in the UNESCO reports, where we draw from the quadrennial periodic reports that governments submit to UNESCO on what they're doing to implement the 2005 Convention. So that whole book called Reshaping Cultural Policies that came out both in 2015 and the one that came out in 2017 basically does the same thing that Magdalena was doing, which is drawing from what governments are saying they're doing to nurture the flourishing of creativity, to enable more equitable distribution of cultural resources and the cultural infrastructure, to support good cultural policies, to show how we are dealing with civil society, how we embrace participation in our countries to support good cultural policy, how we integrate culture into sustainable development frameworks, which is a chapter that I wrote, and also look at some of the key issues around the inequalities and the social sort of exclusion that happens in our sector around gender, around the disabled people, around very small children. We always talk about the youth. When we come to a conference based in Africa, we say it's about the youth, and we have this very long idea of what the youth is. They seem to start like very young at 16 and end at 45, but actually we need to think more about children, and we need to think more about the aged and all of those people that land up getting excluded. And I think the point that Magdalena made via Meredith, very well done, around the gentrification that happens when we think about culture developing cities is a very useful way of thinking that we have to have a different compelling narrative to show how creatives actually can enhance spaces rather than make them more socially exclusive and make them more elite, and actually change the fabric of what we want a wonderful society to be. So on that note, thank you very much. Rosemary.
Thank you, Avril. This is called Stepping into the Gap. You mentioned another colleague of yours. Jenny, yes. Please step into the gap. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? No? Not at the moment?
Thank you, Avril. I was trying to keep a low profile.
You will not.
I will not. I will not.
You dare not.
No. Maybe I can add is how insightful this presentation was. I think it was very helpful to have this bullet points in terms of framing our approach to the creative sector, how we can further support it, but how we can comprehend it to its fullest. And I'm speaking this afternoon, so even closer in time. So I'm sure I will further develop on some of the ideas that were mentioned just in the presentation, but also in the input of Avril just now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We have 7 minutes before we go on the break, and we're going to use this time usefully. We've always lamented that there isn't enough money for culture, there aren't enough resources for culture, and yet we seem to forget the greatest thing that can actually spur us on, and that's creativity and innovation. You know, the English say that necessity is the mother of invention. Thank you. See, we have English professors right here. So the idea of lack is a very troubling one. When you start from a point of lack, you then cannot invent, you then cannot create, you then cannot innovate. And yet, when you think of our societies, particularly African societies, and how innovative they are, and they were, you then realize that at some point, I don't know how to call it, but we got lazy. And sloth is bad. We should never allow ourselves to be lazy. Is there a comment from the floor? Thank you. Please, would you state your name, state your organization, tell us why you're here, and then say your comment.
Thank you.
Please stand up. People
I'm
should see
Susana
not your back.
Souza, and I'm from Angola, and I work with the Ministry of Culture at the International Relations Department. And I'm here because of the SADC meeting, and my goal being here was to actually be part of this idea of putting culture in the center of SADC's concerns. I wanted to reply to what you just said. I don't like the idea of lack, it's true, but I totally disagree with the idea that we became lazy. Our governments in Africa have some responsibilities, and necessity shouldn't be an excuse for us to be inventive when we lack schools, when we lack resources. So I just wanted to say that for me these are two very different situations. To be honest, I feel that as Africans we've been too much inventive. I want to stop being inventive to solve things that should have been solved before. My inventive spirit. That's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, life is never about black or white. There's a whole of a spectrum in between, and it is true. And making statements like in piecemeal fashion is very dangerous because then it sounds generic. You're right. It's also about the responsibility of the leadership in Africa, which is why we need more of the Kofi Annans of this world, because the type of leadership that we have in Africa is very questionable. And we do need to step into the gap as creatives and be accountable as citizens. You know, we now talk about public participation and cultural leadership and civic involvement. You all know those terms, right? And in the arts, this is what it should be. And this is where artists and creatives should actually be stepping into the gap. Is there any other comment? We have 4 minutes. Patrick, is your hand up? Okay. Anybody else? Yes, thank you. How do I reach you? Gentleman at the back. There we go. Please tell us who you are. And rise. Yes, please. Except we can't see you.
Thank
We'd
you.
like to see you.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate. Referring to what Patrick said this morning, it's good to hear this youthful voice admitting that Namibia will be starting on a new slate. But it has become common over 28 years. Every 5 years we start on a new slate and never getting to the targets which cries out high heaven in our society. I'm actually here to find out what the experts from other parts of the world can share so that we can tangibly work on those things that are needed in our society. We have a big problem in the society. We have a relationship between the government and the arts, which is very skewed. And what we actually need in society here is to rectify that imbalance. With regard to the lady who spoke earlier from Australia, I'm impressed with the concern she expressed with regard to older people in the sector. I mean, we paid our dues. Many times we are ignored, especially in our societies in Southern Africa. South Africa is different to here. People are never acknowledged for their works. They contributed as pioneers. And that is a shame to the society with these people who worked so hard most of their lives and they don't get acknowledged and recognized. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say for the time being.
Thank you very much. The issue of recognition is a very important one. In fact, to be recognized is actually a human need. So it is important, and thank you for those comments. And I think I'm absolved from any kind of comment. I'm not a Namibian. But I think the hearing, even though I'd like to keep it active, we have to also look at the time. So we'll give you the mic, and then we'll take one other, and then break for tea. Papa, I recognize you.
Thank you very much.
It's on.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rosemary. It's
Please
just
stand up, people must see you.
It's just an observation I've made after the UNESCO representative was summing up the speech, that the exclusion part of the youth and the children. Now, my concern is on the children. Mm-hmm. The children are in the schools, primary, secondary. Now, the subject, arts. Maybe for me, I just want to know from other country members, how do you monitor that that subject is compulsory, although it is not examinable, but it should be compulsory because we are saying creativity, and some people have the talent, others have the creativity. If we can start from the children, if they can start enjoying that and showing, that will also help us when it comes to career guidance. These children will go for that path because some of them is the talent. If we can start from there.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Remember, it's also about mainstreaming arts and culture, right? It is about not treating it as a separate subject, but actually treating it as part and parcel of mainstream education. We have a very interesting school in South Africa called the First Nations School. And what they do is they teach project-based education. In other words, they teach English, mathematics, art, and everything else through a project. Can you imagine that? From grade R, from the little ones. So as you learn, you're not actually learning a subject, you're learning a skill already. And you develop the language for it while you go along. Papa, I'm here, and good morning. And thank you for last night.
How are you, ma'am?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, I want to the haras kami. Antun demu popisa. Yeah, he will translate.
Okay.
Now, Ya ondapandura meme shua popi o haputoti uno na o apumbwa ukara wapewa irongo. Oshina ukara shapungururwa. Ntutse kuruntu otsetango twapumbwa tutseo etseo yo nkurungu.
Good morning, people. I've greeted you. I'm very happy for the lady who said, the mother who said that it is the young children that must receive education, arts education. However, I need to turn it around and say that it is not the young children. It comes from the adults. The adults are the one who must transfer that to the children.
Ya tsenatse otwanika umbada otsetuna umbada okuya ke pangero ntache pangero na nange shefa na tusikameni opoturongeren kumwe.
In the arts community, we many times point the finger to the other sectors and say that they have forgotten about us. They don't care about us, but they won't come to you unless you, as the art sector, actually get up and go and present your case to the government, to the private sector. And as we are in this room, we are preaching to the converted. How do you get the outsiders into this room if you yourself don't get up to go and make it clear to the others why they should be in this room?
Ya pauhupi tse antu tatudhane ni nuntu. Shashi umodhigo tugashi ndere otafa ka tugashi ne ka tugawete. Na tusikameni tuningenya antu ndota tumunukusha. Ona kuiwa yunona oilimu makega antu kaishimo mbepo ya mboka haratuna inimina.
And finally, I would say that we must understand we are humans playing with humanity, our humaneness. And therefore, it is a call to all of us to realize that the future of humanity lies with you. And we cannot play with it if we are not going to call back ourselves to rethink what we are doing. Is it humane or is it driven by a spirit of capitalism and therefore no longer relevant to us in our existence as humans? And that is why I call it humanity. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I mean, that's what I call manity. We are living in manity. The money rules you, not humanity.
Yeah, the word human has been dropped. Thank you, Papa. You know, the wisdom of Solomon, hey? When they say you have Solomonic wisdom, it means that you actually draw your wisdom not only from the elders, but first from the elders. That was so well said, Papa. We cannot actually add more.